Oh, please work. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of Almighty Blaze, the initiative that helps authors and indie bookstores in the time of the pandemic. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Margarita Gokun Silver and her book, I Named My Dog Pushkin, Notes from a Soviet Girl on Becoming an American Woman. This book, look at this cover. Is this cover fantastic? This book is absolutely amazing. It's funny, it's smart, it's got an astonishing story. And I was talking to Margarita before we got in here, and I had mentioned that I had seen her on Facebook talking about which author photo to use, and I actually got to weigh in on that. Margarita is a really talented author. She's currently in a program getting her MFA. She's got another novel ready to go, which we can't wait to see. And I'm so happy to have you here, Margarita. And again, everybody out there, you want to order this book from your favorite indie bookstore, or you can go to bookshop.org. If you have any questions for Margarita, please just put them in the chat and I'll ask her probably in about 20 minutes. But don't be shy. You don't have to be on camera, and I don't even have to use your name if you don't want me to, but just ask away. So welcome, Margarita. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Oh, I just love the book. I absolutely love the book. So the first question that I always ask, that I always want to know is, I always believe that authors have some kind of a pull or obsession to write the book that they want to write. So what made you decide you were going to write this book, and what did you hope to achieve in writing it? Because it's astonishing. You were this Soviet Jew desperate to immigrate in the 1980s, and you did. So tell us about the beginnings of the book and how difficult it was, or easy or fun it was to write.
So I had these stories in my head for years and years. And every time I would tell somebody one of those stories, they'd be like, you have to write this down. This has to be a book. And I started writing personal essays, and some of these stories were published as personal essays in various publications with a different voice. And I was always thinking, will this be a collection of essays? Will this be a memoir? Because, it's always, is it easy to sell a collection of essays? Is it difficult to sell a collection of essays? So I went back and forth for a few years. And then I had a proposal with a collection of essays, and I sent it out to this publisher, and they came back to me and they said, we would love to have it. And that was smack in the beginning of the second lockdown, or maybe third lockdown, or I don't even know the number of the lockdowns we've had by then. And they said, can you have it ready by the end of January? That was in the middle of October.
And that's been a long time.
And I had just returned to the US, and my husband was undergoing treatment for cancer. And I was like, can I write this book in 2.5 months with the humor that I intend during this horrific time in our life? And my friend said to me, well, this would be a distraction to some degree. You can enter into another zone and be separated from your everyday life. And so I did. I got up every single day, including Saturdays and Sundays, and I wrote my minimum number of words. And I say this in my acknowledgements, that book actually saved me. Because had I not been doing it, I don't know what would I be doing. Because at that point, most of my journalism has to do with culture, travel, food, and all of that kind of fell through with the pandemic. And I was just like untethered outside of my home, in going through a difficult situation, and this was just perfect. So yeah.
So this was the first thing that you had written that was really deeply personal then, correct? Did you feel, well, I know you said it saved you, but did you also feel any sort of worry that it was too personal? Or we talked a little bit about this before we came on broadcast, where you were worried a little bit about what your family might think. How did you deal with those feelings?
I just sat down and I wrote, and I kept writing, and then I would reread each essay and see if was this too frank, too open, too maybe critical, because I didn't want to be critical, because we all live certain lives, we all try our best, and yeah, there's certain things in my family that I disagree with to this and day, and that wasn't probably the best way for me to grow up or to become a young adult or any of that. But my parents did their best. And so I always try to read it with that kind of lens. And then I would always send it to a very trusted writer friend. And I would say, okay, is this too snarky or is this too critical? And she'd be like, no, I mean, it's written with love. And this is what my publisher had to have a legal read on it, because my publisher is in the UK. And I think their laws are stricter on defamation. And this is what the legal read said. It's written with love. And so, yeah.
The book is really hilariously funny, especially since, when you got to America, things were not so easy, and they were kind of different than what you expected. I mean, one of the things that struck me really hilarious is that you tried very, very hard to get rid of your Russian accent, and yet in America, people love that accent. That makes you absolutely exotic and special and wonderful and absurdly cool. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit and tell us some of those stories about what it was like when you first came to America, and how I know you immediately wanted a pair of Levi's.
The first thing that really struck me is we arrived into this tiny little town. Well, we flew into Manchester, New Hampshire, and a community that was welcoming us picked us up and drove us to Nashua, New Hampshire, where we were going to stay. And it was the middle of the night. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And we drive through the town, and it's a tiny little town, and it's got lights everywhere. It was just so well lit up that I was like, oh my God, I'm coming from a huge metropolis, Moscow, and there are barely any streetlights there. And so for me, it was just an unbelievable introduction to what the US was going to be, like the land of abundance, the land of opportunities, the land of lights. Right. And then, there are other things that, they housed us in a community with an outdoor pool. We have never in our life seen an outdoor pool aside from from Communist Party approved, built on the site of a mega church in Moscow pool, to which we as children, in school went and, once in a blue while. Right. So there were these experiences that were just kind of like, wow, this is completely different, and fascinating. And, I had to get used to it. Like, I had to get my language right, because I would confuse the words fun and funny. I remember saying to somebody, "Oh, that's funny," and she's like, "No, what you mean to say is that's fun."
Oh, so, it's a big difference. That's a
big difference, right? So it was a fascinating experience. The first.
It's funny that you mentioned the lights, because I read this other great novel, also written by somebody who's Russian, that was called Lights On All Night Long. And it's about a Russian exchange student. And when he got to America, that was also the one thing that he noticed, that you could have lights. And he would leave his lights on all night long because it was such a different thing and a different experience. So I wanted to know, there's so many incidences in the book that were hilarious, but I want to know about what was the weirdest thing for you about changing from being Russian to being American?
Well, the most important to me, I think, was that I suddenly had the freedom to become who I wanted to become. Because, growing up, you were in the Soviet Union, possibly now the same in Russia. I don't know, can't speak to it. But you're expected to listen to your parents. You're expected to follow in their footsteps. You're expected to pay a lot of heed to their opinions. And, they want you to become a doctor, then you go and become a doctor. If they want you to become, an engineer, you go and become an engineer. You go to university to which they went. So for us, we were Jewish in the Soviet Union. There were lots of quotas. We couldn't become just anyone. So my parents wanted me to become a doctor or an engineer. I refused to become a doctor for many reasons, but also because there were quotas and I didn't think I could get in. And why would I want to do something that I don't want to do, plus try to get in and then disappoint my parents? So when we arrived to the US, I kind of promised them, to get them to agree, because I had spent a year trying to get them to agree to immigrate. So I kind of promised them that I would become a doctor finally. And so that's what they expected me to be. And But then I was sitting in a class and I was like, why am I doing this? And I remember distinctly it was endocrinology. And I was looking at the professor and I couldn't understand a word of what he was saying, not because my English was bad, but because I was like, what am I doing here? This is
Right.
not me. This is
Right.
not my thing. And I looked around and everybody else was scribbling away and they were so excited. I'm like, I'm not excited about this. Why am I living somebody else's dreams? I came here to live mine. And so I just walked out, dropped it, and said to my parents, I'm not going to become a doctor. So I think for me, the biggest shock was, hey, you can actually choose what you want to be. It's, possible.
But if you grew up in a culture like that where you couldn't really choose who you wanted to be and you had to sort of follow what your parents wanted you to be, so where did that rebellious streak come from? Did you always have that? Or was it, did you have access to, American books and magazines where you saw a different sort of heroine?
No, we didn't.
Must
I
be in
mean,
your
there were
genes,
lots
the
of
DNA.
there were a lot of bootlegged, Bruce Springsteen going around and other sort of, rock bands. But no, we didn't. I was always rebellious. But I mean, as a teenager, you weren't expected to rebel in the Soviet Union. You were either a good girl or a bad girl, right?
Yeah,
So bad girl was like all sorts of connotations. I was supposed to be a good girl, but I rebelled. I screamed back. My parents took me to a psychologist asking
no.
why I was, behaving this way. And the psychologist, a Russian psychologist with the big white hat, she said, you just have to be stricter with her, which was completely obviously a different pendulum. I should not have. So they did become stricter. And I would just, I would slam doors. I'd say that I'm running away. Of course, my running away was to the stairway of my building because I was terrified that something was going to happen to me. But still, I exhibited this, look, I want to do what I want to do. I want to be my own independent person. So I don't know. It may have been built into me. I don't know. But definitely, definitely arriving to the US gave me this, hope to believe that it's possible because look, everyone else is doing it and they're totally fine.
Right. So let's talk about, you mentioned being Jewish in Russia, and the anti-Semitism there. There's been a resurgence of anti-Semitism in America now, along with a lot of other ugly things. So this is sort of a two-part question. So the first part is, can you talk about what it was like to be Jewish in Russia and how different it was when you came to the United States? The second part of the question is, how scared are you, or how similar to things going on in Russia do you see the anti-Semitism going on in America now? And what would you say to Americans to, speak up more to stop it?
Well, it is very triggering for me as to what's going on now because I basically lived with it my first 20 years. And in the book, I describe how I found out I was Jewish. I didn't find out from my parents. I was 9 and I was living normal Soviet child life. And then Jewish was not a religion in the Soviet Union because Soviet Union was an atheist country. Religion was outlawed, and Jewish was an ethnicity. It was your nationality. They put it in your passport as you were a Jew. You couldn't be anybody else. If your parents were both Jews,
Wow.
you were a Jew. Now, if your one of them was a Jew and another one was Russian, then you can choose a more palatable nationality and write yourself as a Russian. But I had 2 Jewish parents. I had no choice. And they would write it down everywhere. Like a teacher's journal that contained our grades had written out that I was Jewish. And everybody, there's a line of names and then everybody Russian and I'm Jewish. And that's how the kids found out when I was 9 because they were sneaking in to find out our grades for some tests. And from then on, I was it was constant, basically. I was called Kaik on probably a daily basis. I was the only Jewish child in my class. And, I sort of learned to start to hide, to never tell anyone I was Jewish. According to the phenotype, I didn't look Jewish because the Russian or the Soviet people at that time had an eagle eye for who looked Jewish. Like my grandfather looked Jewish, for instance, and he was called all sorts of names at bus stops and in crowds. But because I didn't look Jewish, I was able to hide until they saw my documents, which was basically everywhere, right? And so this hiding became part of me. And I joke in the book that if I was a quantum physicist, I probably could have invented an invisibility cloak, because I was so good at never speaking up, at never saying anything. It's just, constantly being like undercover almost. And so when I moved to the States, for me, it was really bizarre that Jewish people just told everybody they were Jewish. I'm like, aren't you afraid? Aren't you terrified? Aren't you scared? It took me many, many years to ever admit to anyone that I was Jewish, right? Not that anyone was asking, but like still, I still feel at the pit of my stomach, I still feel fear when I do this, which is a complete opposite from my daughter, who we raised to be Jewish. And who spoke up very early on against anti-Semitism. She actually encountered it in her school, which, she was 15 or 16, I can't remember, when she told me that some classmate told her or asked her where her striped pajamas were or something like this. And, and her WhatsApp group, people would use Heil Hitler on a regular basis. And so she started speaking up against it, because I was horrified. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to this school and I'm speaking to somebody. And she's like, Mom, I got it. Don't worry. I got it. And so for me, it was this a moment of huge pride. I mean, I'm super proud of her in many respects, but like that she was able to do what I wasn't able to. 30 years earlier, that happened to me. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go hide somewhere. But she was speaking up, and she's still speaking up against all sorts of anti-Semitic utterances anywhere on the internet.
It's brave. That's great. It's like you broke the cycle. You broke the cycle, which is very, very good. Is there anything, I mean, I love America. I love my country, but I recognize that we have a whole lot of problems, and we have a lot of racism, and we have a lot of, just people who frown on education. So knowing that, you're happy here in America, I still want to ask you, what is it about America that disappoints you? That you wish were better? Let me rephrase it, that you wish were a little bit better.
Having lived in other countries with my husband's job, the social safety net is really disappointing in the US. The healthcare, the availability, accessibility to education, the community rallying around these ideas rather than labeling them socialism and running away from them. I think this is really disappointing, because in other countries, we know it's not socialism. We know it works. We know it helps marginalized people to live better lives and gives opportunities to more people. So I think that's disappointing. Tomatoes are very disappointing.
Really? That's hilarious.
I have to say that. Yes. And I think that what happened after the 2016 unfortunate election and all the infighting that's happening now and all the polarization is just, it's just so scary and so disheartening to see.
For us, for everyone, it is.
Yeah.
For everyone, it is. It's really, especially with healthcare, because there have been, I don't know why socialism is such a dirty word in the United States, except that people think it's the Cold War again. It's the evil Russian. The Russians are coming to take us over. And I've tried to explain to people that, socialism is not what you think it is. And this is a very good thing. This is how you're going to benefit. And people they just don't want to hear. And it's fear. Again, it's fear.
Yeah.
So let's return to the humor, because this book is like so funny and so wonderful. Tell us why you named your dog Pushkin. Tell us that story, because it's really, really funny.
So it was a hilarious moment in our lives. We were living back in Russia on my husband's job in St. Petersburg, not in Moscow. And my daughter, who was at the time 8, I think, she'd been dying to get a dog. So we finally said, okay, we're going to get her a dog. So we went out. She has allergies and my husband has allergies. So we got this little Maltese, this hypoallergenic dog. And we brought her to a Sunday school. She was going to Jewish community Sunday school. And so we brought him there to show her. And before she came out, we're like, what are we going to name this? What are we going to name him? And one of the girls in another class, she's like, well, how about Pushkin? And we're like, perfect. It tells everybody about his origins. We got him in Russia and St. Petersburg. So a famous poet was born and lived all his life in St. Petersburg. It's a cute name and it's just perfect. So we named him that. And the first time I mentioned it to my daughter's music teacher in St. Petersburg, she was horrified. She was like, how could you? This is terrible. It's so disrespectful. He's the greatest poet in the history of Russian literature. And I was like, but it's just, he's very cute. He's really cute. So, and I still get this kind of reaction from people. Yeah. 13 years later, he's now 13. Yeah.
It's hilarious, but I'm very glad you never changed the dog's name. It's a perfect name for a dog. I love the first part of it. You have another hilarious story that I really want you to tell. It's a screenwriting letter story to Bill Clinton versus Steven Spielberg. It's I actually read that story twice because I was laughing so hard. I had to read it to believe it. So please tell us that story.
So coming from the Soviet Union, you had to get your opportunities whenever you could. Like I call it, you just never know what can happen, right? You needed to be fast and you needed to really grab at them. And so one time I graduated from my graduate program already in the U.S. and I was riding a train and the one that goes from Connecticut to no, not Connecticut. Well, anyway, I can't. Metro North. I was writing that to New York for my job, and I saw this Variety magazine, and I opened it up just because I was always looking for some other job because maybe I wasn't happy at the work I was doing, and they were looking for a Russian speaker to work with movies. I don't remember what else it said, but I looked at it. I was like, oh my God, this is just like would be perfect. And I should have taken this opportunity and sent my resume because it was basically maybe 2 or 3 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And where else would you have a Russian English speaker who could probably do this in the US with education, etc.? I didn't take it. But I've learned after that you should take any opportunity and go back to my beginnings. And so when I wrote a screenplay, my very first screenplay about my grandmother, my great-grandmother getting lost at a train station and losing her entire family, they went and immigrated to Argentina in 1916, and she ended up staying in Russia. I figured it was such a fascinating story about a Jewish experience and the tale of settlement. So I said, you know what, I met Hillary Clinton when I was working in Uzbekistan because I was doing a women's roundtable for her. I'm just going to write to Bill because I met her and because Bill's probably friends with Steven Spielberg and Steven Spielberg is probably going to love this kind of story. And why not? You just never know. So I did. Wrote it and obviously it didn't go anywhere. But, I always tell my daughter, you take every chance you get.
Oh, yeah.
Because you just never know.
It's that bravery that's completely amazing. What also really fascinated me about this book is you started out wanting to be completely assimilated almost in America, and then you came to realize that that's not the goal. You don't have to be. Instead, you have to find who you really want to be and that you could be anybody. Can you talk about that and tell us a little bit about your journey, please?
So, my entire purpose of coming to the US was to become an American, obviously to be free as a Jew and to have my opportunities, but also, not to be a Russian anymore. I didn't want the accent. I didn't want to live anywhere near the Russian community. I just, I wanted to marry an American, a locally born American. For me, to assimilate was to be a successful immigrant, basically. And I did this for a while. I don't have a Russian accent. I have a bit of an accent, but I guess I don't have a Russian accent. At least that's what I've been told. But, when my daughter was born and then when she started growing up, there were certain things from my Russian background that, I was coming back to. And I was like, these things have value. From the food to the reading to the education and music to, things that I used to hate about growing up with. I was like, that seems like it has value to me. And so I slowly came back a little bit, and I realized that, your immigrant success is not that you completely get rid of where you grew up with. But in that you incorporate it somehow, and you turn into like a combination of both, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more like being a global citizen.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were so many sort of fun facts in this book, like Soviets don't drink water during meals. And there was another hilarious section in the book about how surprised they were that you had water at the meal. Can you tell that story? It's so funny. I'd love to hear it again.
So we went through immigration. In those days, you didn't go directly to the US. You had to go through immigration in Austria and Italy. And so our first Western country was Austria, but we weren't there for very long. And then Italy. And in Italy, when they shipped us there, and by them I mean the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society and the Joint Distribution Committee, they gave us for a week, we stayed in a hostel that served meals. And so you have this visual of Russian immigrants who have never been outside of the Soviet Union, the vast majority of them. And we all running down to this basement where they're going to serve us our first dinner. And there were two shocks there. First was, first of all, you had this, metal-looking plates, which to us immediately sort of said, gulag. This is what we think about prison, gulag, right? Metal plates, right? But then the first thing was they brought cold water in pitchers and they put it in the middle of the table. And everybody's looking around going, where's the tea? Where's the tea? Because for Russians, you have your meals with the tea. At the very least, you have them with this fruit drink we called compote. That did not come. So there was this cold water. And then there was a bunch of servers that walked in and they just threw pasta into our dishes. And then they poured hot tomato sauce over it. And we're like, what is this? You don't eat pasta with tomato sauce. What is this? You eat it with cheese.
Butter,
like,
right?
I mean, in Russia, we had our pasta and we grated cheese on top of it. So it was just this weird thing. But the water was like my parent, and I realized that this was what we were going to drink. And I said, okay, well, that is my Western experience that I'm going to adapt because I want to become assimilated Westerner, right? So I poured myself cold water, and I remember on that metal jug, there were this condensation. So it was really cold. And in Russia, you didn't drink cold stuff. That was dangerous. You would get a sore throat. And so I poured myself cold water and I drank it, and my parents looked at me and everyone around looked at me, and I was just like, this is how I'm going to start my assimilation experience. And I still prefer water with my dinner.
That is wonderful. That is so cinematic. Would you read something from your book for us? Would you mind? Just a few pages?
Oh my God. Yeah, sure.
I'd love to hear this book in your voice.
I don't know. Should I do the...
Whatever you want to read. Just open the book and read, because every page has gold as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Also, I want to remind people, bookshop.org is where you can find your favorite indie bookstore and you can purchase the book. It helps bookstores, it helps authors, it helps your community. And if you have any questions, post them in the comments. Don't be shy.
So I'm going to read, just because we just done Italy, I'm going to read a little bit of what we experienced during immigration in Italy. And this is, the prelude to this. You're arriving as a Soviet immigrant, and obviously your clothes are very, very Soviet. And for me, I had to become a Westerner, and therefore hoping for a Western wardrobe, right? So there's a section that's called Upgrade to the Wardrobe. We all arrived in Italy with bulging luggage, not because we had to squeeze our entire previous lives into 2 suitcases per person the Soviet government graciously allowed us to take, but because we had to squeeze our entire previous lives into them, plus allow space for smoked sausage to supplement our diets and a collection of Soviet trinkets to supplement our allowances. A street market in Rome, named Americano, was one of the places to sell these trinkets, and together with other emigres, we'd take a train and then a bus there, dragging along our collection of paraphernalia. Everyone said Italians would spend their hard-earned liras on. That collection was carefully researched, curated, and based on the instructions sent by the emigres who came before us. our blanket of trinkets included Rostova metal platters, guaranteed to woo an Italian mamma who just had to serve her homemade ravioli on them. Palech lacquer boxes featuring motifs of Russian winter, depicting scenes from Russian fairy tales and showcasing portraits of Lenin. That last one, not sold and is now sitting on a shelf in my parents' guest bedroom. Octoberist lapel pins with young, pudgy-faced Lenin, who apparently looked just like young Alexander Zavarov, a famous Soviet footballer. Sold out in one day to the excited group of young Italians chanting, Piccolo Zavarov, Piccolo Zavarov. Commandersky wrist watches backed by the full faith and credit of the Red Army, preferably the ones with a Kremlin-like star instead of the number 12 for more authentic feeling and therefore a few more liras. A pair of pointy shoes we couldn't for the life of us sell anywhere. I accompanied my parents to that market not out of the goodness of my heart or because I wanted to help them sell. It was mostly driven by the answer I got when I approached them about revamping my wardrobe by visiting a few of the local boutiques and sinking approximately 10 times an average Soviet salary into a pair of jeans I found hot. The answer sounded something like, are you out of your mind? Go take the trash out, and absolutely not. Clothes are not our priority. Since I didn't give up easily, and especially when such important thing as dreams of an improved me wearing jeans were concerned, I convinced them that it was only fair to pay me commission if I went with them to Americano and sold a few things. What I did with my commission was obviously my business, and since I oversold all of our compatriots using my fluent Italian, they didn't argue. I spent every lira I made on a dark green velvety blazer with silky lining, hands down the most beautiful thing I've ever laid eyes on, and the most expensive thing I ever owned. My parents pointed out it was also the most irresponsible thing I've ever done, but I disagreed because clearly they didn't understand the importance of clothes and transformations.
That is wonderful. That is totally wonderful. So riffing on that a little bit, you write about the gender divide, the different roles of men and women and how different it was in America. Can you talk about that too, please?
So yeah, in the Soviet Union, women had two jobs, basically. They went out and they worked to build the greater communist country on earth. And then they came home. During lunch, they ran out on errands and they had to buy things and stand in line because obviously it was a deficit-based economy. And then they came home and they had to make dinner, they had to clean up, they had to help their children with homework while our fathers sat on the couch and stared at the TV or read the newspaper. And so I knew that when I moved to America, this is not going to be my life. I'm never going to do this. And so I had to make sure that I'm not married to a former Soviet compatriot who may expect something like this because, you grow up with the Soviet parents. This is how you're raised.
Right.
And so I said this was one of the reasons I wanted to marry a locally born American, because I said there's no way they can be as bad as Soviet men and expect as much domestic work. I don't know where I got that idea, but somehow I imagined that they're going to be better. And so it worked. In my case, my husband doesn't mind washing the dishes, which is one of the things I still hate to do. And yes, I'm mostly the one who cleans the house, but he helps with groceries. He helps with everything my dad has never done. And that was my, looking at my dad and how he was my impetus for marrying a locally born American. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, in certain parts of the country, it's still very much like that.
Yeah, I don't know where I got that idea.
So you got lucky. Can you tell us, if you have any advice for immigrants coming to America, what is the one thing that you think nobody told you that you wish you had known?
Well, nobody told me that no one was going to be interested in my background. So I was really ridiculous coming up to people and saying, hello, I'm from the Soviet Union, and thinking they were going to be, oh my God, tell us more. They could care less. So
really? Because I would be the one saying, oh my God, tell me more. I find this really fascinating.
I know, right? But I didn't have that experience, and I ended up stopping to do this because I really sounded demented, I think, to many people. I don't know if that's a good advice. I mean, I don't know if this society has moved on since those days. This was in 1990. You know, we're now in 2021.
Right.
But I found that maybe I keep my mouth a little more shut and just observe things and learn by observation rather than saying, hey, be interested in me. Look at me. I came from behind the Iron Curtain, from an evil empire. Ask me some questions. But I don't know if that's a good advice. But anyway, maybe.
I just find it completely fascinating. Do you have any yearning to go back to Russia at all? Any nostalgia, or do you feel like that door's closed?
That door's closed. Nostalgia-wise, it's closed. I still have an incredible interest in doing some tourism in Russia, like taking Trans-Siberian Railway and stuff like that. But I don't feel safe with the current government in Russia and
Right.
things that have been happening. So at this point, it's a no for me. But not nostalgia. I don't have any more nostalgia now.
Okay. Well, I want to show this gorgeous cover yet again. I named my dog Pushkin. Oh, you have one too. This is truly a book to read now because it'll make you feel great. It's fascinating. It's interesting, and I want to thank Margarita for being here so much. Anytime you want to talk about Russia, I'm here because. Oh, wait, we have a question. Do you do stand up live anywhere?
Oh God, no. No. I'm not that courageous to be on stage. No.
Oh, I can't imagine you're not that courageous after reading your book and talking to you here. You seem
Thank you, but I freeze on stage as far as if I have to do. Stand up is very it's not prepared. Maybe maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I don't know anything about stand up, but like I have to be really super prepared to be on stage. But thank you.
Yeah, Jules and you ought to. Yeah, because the stories are just great. But as long as you write them down, that is terrific.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for being here. I was worried about my internet, but whatever
it worked.
You gave it worked perfectly.
Yes, thank you.
I totally loved your book. I'm going to show the cover one more time because this cover is like one of the better covers. And we talked a little bit about this before we came on, where you said this was actually your first cover choice and you loved it, which almost never happens.
I know, right? I'm lucky.
And also, you also said another incredible thing, which when you sent in these essays, they were accepted immediately, which also never happens. So coming to America was a good move for you.
Yes, I know. In many more ways than one. Yeah, definitely.
So again, thank you so much. When your novel comes up, be sure to get in contact because we'd love to have you on again. And thank you everyone for coming here, and thank you for the questions. And don't forget to buy the book. I named my dog Pushkin. And we'll see you all later.
Thank you.